SG. Members of the media, like first to apologize for the delayed start of the briefing. There were just a number of issues that the Secretary General had to attend to. The Secretary General is going to present the statement of the National Executive Committee on the outcomes of our virtual NEC that was held between Saturday the 27th of July and Sunday the 28th of July. So SG, if you are ready, or maybe we should, I see Comrade Tony is also here. So the SG will come and present the statement, and thank you very much for your indulgence once more. Over to you, SG.
Well, thanks very much. Thanks for your patience. And to the viewers out there, I'm just going to read the statement of the National Executive Committee, the outcomes of the NEC over the last 2 days, Saturday and Sunday. The National Executive Committee of the ANC met on the 27th and the 28th of June 2020 by means of a visual platform because of the corona regulations. The NEC took place 6 months. The NEC takes place 6 months into the global COVID-19 pandemic, which has had profound social and economic consequences for our country and the world. As the NEC was deliberating, the virus had infected more than 10 million people and claimed the lives of more than 500,000 people across the globe. A second wave of infections in countries that have hitherto managed to control the pandemic is of great concern. The COVID-19 pandemic affects the public health, economies, and social cohesion of all nations with devastating consequences for all sectors of society, especially the most vulnerable. The pandemic has once again exposed the persistent fault lines of poverty, inequality, and unemployment in our society. And as a nation, we must seize this opportunity collectively to fight both this public health pandemic, but also to embark on a program of socio-economic reconstruction, solidarity, and common prosperity. The NEC therefore considered a draft COVID-19 Reconstruction, Growth, and Development Plan from the Economic Transformation Committee, which will be finalized and released for public comment and inputs by our structures. The NEC commended the government and the people of our nation, led by President Cyril Ramaphosa, for their clear and decisive leadership in driving a united, focused, and coordinated response to the pandemic. The rising numbers of infections remain a matter of grave concern, as economic and other activities are being ramped up. Accordingly, the National Executive Committee called for the maximum vigilance, responsibility, and care by everyone living in South Africa. The COVID-19 pandemic will constitute a new normal for our country and the world for the foreseeable future. Consequently, this calls upon all of us to change our behavior fundamentally in keeping with the injunction, protect yourselves, defend one another, let us do it together. We must commit ourselves rigorously to adhere to the practices of hand hygiene, wearing of masks, physical distancing, avoiding crowded places, and large gatherings. The NEC observed a moment of silence for the families, colleagues, and friends affected by the COVID, and friends affected by over 2,400 COVID-19 deaths recorded to date. The NEC again paid special tribute to healthcare and other essential workers who over the last few months have worked even longer working hours and placing their health and those of their families at risk. Have our nation on the front lines of the war on the pandemic. We want to take this opportunity to salute them. In the midst of the global COVID pandemic, South Africa and the world face two other crises: gender-based violence and femicide, as well as the persistent scourge of racism. The NEC welcomed the Alliance campaigns against racism and gender-based violence, in particular the great focus on the role of men and boys in the fight against gender-based violence, and for the amendment and improved enforcement of laws to strengthen the prosecution of gender-based violence perpetrators. And we want to say to the people out there, and the women out there, and the men out there in our society, continue with the struggle, and we ask our structures to ensure that they must actually participate and actively fight against gender-based violence. The pandemic hit us as we emerged from our first 25 years of democracy. As the country prepared for local government elections, as the country is preparing for local government elections in 2021, the pandemic has disrupted and delayed all these preparations, the adaptations required, and the recent Constitutional Court ruling on the Electoral Act have given impetus to society-wide engagements on broader electoral reforms, which will have an important impact on our political system for the decades to come. The National Executive Committee commended ANC structures at branch, regional, provincial, national level, as well as the leagues, for adapting to new ways of working imposed by the pandemic and ensuring that they are at the center of efforts to deal with this pandemic. The National Executive Committee resolved that the National General Council, as well as provincial, regional, and branch conferences this year should be postponed until further notice, in keeping with regulations aimed at containing the spread of COVID-19 pandemic, and the NEC dealt with this and other major issues confronting the country in a spirit of robust debate and unity of purpose, more determined to ensure that our nation survives and thrives through and beyond the COVID-19 pandemic and its associated challenges. Indeed, we have already interacted with our structures to ensure that they remain working hard on the ground and they ensure that they observe the regulations, and therefore there won't be any general meetings, and that's why we actually postpone conferences. On the COVID-19 pandemic, we have not yet won the war. As President Ramaphosa, in his political overview to the National Executive Committee, the President highlighted the difficult road we traveled in 2020 as the novel coronavirus pandemic spread across the globe. South Africa acted decisively and early to get the public health messages to all citizens and inhabitants, to start preparing our health system and personnel, and to put in place the capacity for tracing and testing. The state of national disaster of March 15, 2020, followed by hard lockdown until end of May 2020, helped to slow infection and deaths during these first critical months. The pandemic exposed the severe and persistent fault lines in our society: food insecurity, the precariousness of incomes of informal sector, casual and temporary workers, unequal access to internet connectivity and data, backlogs in access to basic services, and underdevelopment. These fault lines meant that the burden of COVID-19 remain unequally distributed, as it affects every woman, every man, every child within the borders of the Republic of South Africa. But a number of measures are in place to mitigate the social and economic impact of the pandemic. This includes swiftly providing water to communities, to schools and other critical facilities who were without water, food relief, shelter to the homeless, increase of existing social grants, and the introduction of COVID-19 grant for the unemployed who do not receive any other grant or benefits. It includes the package of economic measures to mitigate the impact of lockdown on workers and businesses, expansion of the UIF system, tax concessions, specific support packages in the environmental, tourism and hospitality industry, as well as small business sector. The 200 billion South African Reserve Bank and banks package to assist other businesses and sectors, and an agricultural and agro-processing plan to address national food security. Parliament also received a special supplementary budget to allow for reprioritization and funding of the public health, social and economic responses to the COVID-19 pandemic. President Ramaphosa focused on other critical and immediate measures necessary to aid economic recovery and reconstruction, with specific attention to job creation. And most importantly, is a massive infrastructure program to stimulate investment and employment. Government has already convened the Sustainable Infrastructure Development Symposia to develop priority sectors, projects, and plans. And President also reiterated the ANC commitment to agricultural and land reform as part of COVID-19 economic recovery and reconstruction. And the National Executive Committee has instructed the ANC at all levels to focus on all those decisions which we adopted in terms of conference. The National Executive Committee applauded the African Union, the AU Commission, and President Ramaphosa as current chairperson of the African Union for the timely and consistent manner in which they have led and enabled African responses and interest, including a platform to ensure access to all African nations to vital medical supplies and advocating for African economic recovery, including debt relief and forgiveness. We must continue to build on this strength, to strengthen the global progressive and left forces. The presentations by various committees of the subcommittee of the ANC stress the points that the West is still to come, and we must brace ourselves as a nation and all sectors in the society. And the most effective public health strategy remains prevention and to halt the spread of the virus. This means that we must continue to tirelessly advocate for the following public health preventative measures by all. First, physical distancing, keeping at least a distance of 1.5 meters between persons, limitations on gatherings, public transport, workplaces, and shopping malls. Hand hygiene by washing hands with soap and water or with sanitizers. Universal use of cloth masks, by the public that cover nose and mouth. Monitoring for flu-like symptoms. Encouraging those over 60 years and others with conditions, diabetes, hypertension, cancer, asthma, and other diseases to work remotely and stay at home. These prevention measures by all South Africans, together with rigorous testing, quarantine, and isolation measures, are critical to the current phase of the pandemic as we seek to find the delicate balance of saving lives and saving livelihoods. This means hypervigilance because as we are easing lockdown, the virus has not eased its infection. The National Executive Committee once more welcome the reports on COVID-19 pandemic and resolve to support the strengthening of the district model, development model, as we disaggregate and manage the pandemic at this level, including through the use of the CSIR information system on vulnerable communities in each and every district and municipality, and implementing a national ANC mass mobilization campaign working at community and street level to advocate for and support public health prevention, screening, testing measures, as well as the social and economic measures. And that's why we are calling upon our structures to actively participate, working together with society. We must work together to stop gender-based violence, because the National Executive Committee deliberated on the notion of a second pandemic of gender-based violence. And the ANC structures working with street committees and with all sectors of society will continue to mount a massive campaign to change attitudes and to provide support in the war on gender-based violence. The NEC further acknowledged that gender-based violence takes place in the context of traumatized nation, where violence is seen as the first response to any problem and challenge, reflected in our high rates of violent crimes. And amongst the key recommendations from the National Executive Committee, from the subcommittee, the National Executive Committee adopted a review of legislation that governs gender-based violence to ensure tough sanctions for perpetrators, including bail conditions, sentencing and the enforcement of restraining orders, training of police officers, magistrates, and other personnel on gender-based violence to avoid the second victimization of women, children, and others reporting abuse. A society-wide awareness campaign on sexist attitudes and socialization, as well as patriarchal power relations in which gender-based violence flourish, with special focus on boys and teenagers. And the National Executive Committee vows that we must all continue to speak for the victims of gender-based violence and femicide, and to break the culture of silence around perpetrators, because silence is betrayal. More generally, as a society, we need a process of healing, dealing with the wounds of intergenerational trauma and violence, so that we begin to build a generation free from violence and trauma. And we are asking society, we are asking all men to run the talk. Fighting the abuse of alcohol is one of the issues which the National Executive Committee focus on. Research by South African Medical Research Council and others show the huge drop in alcohol-related injuries, as well as crime during the period of the lockdown and the ban on the sale of alcohol. Conversely, we have seen these evils manifesting themselves again as the ban was lifted. Clearly, as a society, we have problems. With average alcohol consumption per adult, 9.51, considerably higher than the average in the rest of Africa, which is 6.10, and the world 6.21 in 2011. This not only leads to injuries and crime, but also 1 in 10 deaths in 2019 was alcohol-related, and our country continues to record high levels of fetal alcohol spectrum disorders. Alcoholism continues to destroy individual, brilliant lives, and has a devastating effect on children and families. Although the reversal of the alcohol ban is not on the agenda, we do have to, as a society, look into the matter as part of our broader program to reconstruct our communities and strengthen families. And there are measures for social inclusion and expanding social safety net. The deep impact inequality and poverty despite progress made, continue to be reflected in the millions of people facing hunger, living in informal settlements, in indigent households, and unemployed. We introduced social measures to mitigate the impact on the pandemic, such as food relief, increasing grants, and special COVID-19 grant. Although these measures made a difference, given the devastating economic impact expected, the pandemic unfolds. We must look at additional measures to broaden the social safety net and provide for the dignity of all South Africans. And hence we call upon society and all South Africans to take care, to make sure that they understand that disease, this pandemic, does actually kill. The National Executive Committee therefore tasked the Social Transformation Committee and Economic Transformation Committee to urgently meet to look at the feasibility and the detailed modalities of basic income grant, including the costing and financing of this measure, and to report to the National Working Committee as soon as possible. COVID-19 economic recovery and reconstruction must actually take place. COVID-19 pandemic continues to impact negatively on economic activity in South Africa and around the world. Unemployment is rising, businesses are under pressure, public finances are being stretched, and the legacy of underdevelopment is laid bare for all to see. The National Executive Committee discussed a range of economic intervention measures under a framework for reconstruction, growth, and transformation, which will continue to stimulate economic growth and job creation, economic transformation and inclusion, and speed up the commitments in the ANC 2019 election manifesto. The first pillar will be to mobilize society around an infrastructure-led recovery, with new investment in energy, in water, in sanitation, roads and bridges, human settlement, health and education, digital infrastructure, and public transport. To achieve significant job creation multipliers, the emphasis will be on localization, including maximizing the use of South African materials and construction companies, as well as labor-intensive methods. We have actually engaged government to implement this program as soon as possible. The district development model should be strengthened to improve service delivery and infrastructure expansion in both rural and urban centers, and to forge new spatial forms in its settlement and transport systems, and to bring people closer to areas of social and economic opportunities. As a second pillar, promote investment in key productive sectors such as agriculture, manufacturing, mining, tourism, and other services, alongside the necessary reforms in the telecommunications sector to allow for reduction of data cost. Similarly, the growth and job creation potential of energy-related investment, including green industries, must be harnessed through local production linked to the energy investment program, as required in the integrated resource plan industrialization. Industrialization and expansion of productive sectors will be accelerated through increased international trade, especially with other countries on the African continent. While working to restore the fiscal stability, South Africa needs to deploy macroeconomic policy instruments compatible with economic reconstruction. Reconstruction programs must be sufficiently financed and financially sustainable. In the National Treasury and South African Reserve Bank, development finance institutions and private financial institutions all have a role to play, and the mobilization of funds for increased investment in infrastructure and key productive sectors will inevitably require a combination of public and private resources. Sustainable financing of economic recovery will require close coordination of fiscal and monetary policy to ensure ongoing access to capital markets, reduce the cost of borrowing, as well as strengthening the role of development financial institutions. Changes should be made to Regulations 28 under Pension Funds Act to enable cheaper access to finance for development. And furthermore, regulators should be vigilant to ensure increased competition in the banking sector. And that's why we are arguing that the decision of the National Conference on the speeding up of implementing and establishing the Post Bank, establishing the State Bank, must be accelerated to facilitate a society-wide mobilization to advance South Africa economic reconstruction and recovery. A process of social dialogue and social compacting at national and sectoral level will be required to unite in action key constituencies, including business, labor, community, government, led by South African presidency. And lastly, on state-owned enterprises, the National Executive Committee took note of ongoing work towards the transformation of SOEs. The NEC welcomed plans to restructure South African Airways, which will ensure at the end of the day state majority, state ownership. And we also welcome the search for equity partners and encourage development finance institutions and worker equity, in addition to private sector participation. The ANC calls on government to ensure that we minimize job losses as a result of restructuring and the challenges facing the aviation sector throughout the globe. We urge social plans to assist workers in the immediate and as we move towards rebuilding the national aviation sector. And therefore, the National Executive Committee notes that from the private sector, there are a lot of retrenchments. Our state-owned enterprises are actually dealing with these challenges. And we are actually saying, we have noted also plans at SABC and other state-owned entities. And we call on all our boards and management to circumspect, not to add unemployment. And we seek to preserve jobs during this difficult economic climate. End to racism and violence. The National Executive Committee welcomed the campaign of the Alliance launched on the 5th of June 2020 to stand in solidarity with the global Black Lives Matter movement and with African Americans as they battle centuries of slavery and institutionalized racism as part of the global progressive community against racism and violence. The National Executive Committee concurred with the approach that in South Africa, racism expressed itself in the legacies and outmoded attitude caused by and engendered by the system of apartheid, colonialism, and patriarchy. Although we have made progress over the last 26 years of democracy, these legacies persist, and we must continue to fight racism wherever it rears its ugly head. We must continue building a non-racial South Africa and continue to transform our society into a national democracy that truly belongs to all. All South Africans, black and white, are therefore encouraged to become part of the global movement against racism and continue to fight for decolonization of our society, for a South Africa in a world that is equitable, just, and recognize the human dignity and celebrate our rich diversity. On local government, the National Executive Committee appreciated efforts to build a responsive and effective developmental state across all spheres of government. And the National Executive Committee remained concerned about the state of local government, reflected in high and rising debt to Eskom and water boards, dwindling revenues, making it difficult to pay creditors and staff, and also impacting on their ability to provide basic services to communities such as water and electricity. And the latest adverse findings of the Auditor General and many municipalities under administration are further causes for concern. The National Executive Committee agreed to the measures by COGTA to support municipalities, especially those who have proven to be non-viable, and to address the weaknesses that continue to plague this sphere of government. And during these difficult times, we call on state-owned utilities and financial institutions, therefore, to be sensitive to the difficulties faced by municipalities and households when it comes to cut-offs and evictions. Actually, no to evictions. The National Executive Committee report from ANC structures knows the report from ANC structures who have taken action in the course of those who were actually doing a lot of wrong things on the ground. And I think we congratulated and we said all our structures must make sure that they act in the public interest. The NEC called on ANC structures to continue to be vigilant and act promptly where there are misuse of food relief packages or other wrongdoings, and on public representatives to be diligent and ethical in saving their communities, as well as our structures. On strengthening the work of the Integrity Commission, the National Executive Committee appointed the following additional members to the Integrity Committee in order to strengthen and fill vacancies on the Commission. We appointed the following women veterans: Comrade Thandi Lujabe Rankwe, Comrade Jenny Schreiner, and Comrade Dikeledi Ntingwane. These are new members of the Integrity Commission. We have already communicated with the chair of the Integrity Commission on this matter. The National Executive Committee also received the report of the Integrity Commission on the 2 Limpopo provincial leaders who were allegedly implicated in the VBS saga. The report noted that it is now close to 2 years, almost 2 years, that these 2 comrades stepped aside from their positions as provincial deputy chair and provincial treasurer, respectively. The National Executive Committee took a decision to reinstate these 2 comrades immediately. Their reinstatement will be preceded by engagement with structures and affected stakeholders, which will be led by the ANC national officials. The National Executive Committee also looked at local government elections and looked at the new electoral system reforms after the Constitutional Court judgment. The NEC supports the initiative by officials and NWC to engage in the development of proposals on a synchronized national, provincial, and local government elections to enable better coordination and implementation of policies across the spheres of government. So we are arguing that we should not have a provincial and national elections, and after 2 years you have local government elections. We are actually looking at synchronized national, provincial, and local government elections. The National Executive noted the Constitutional Court judgment on the Electoral Act and established a team to work with all internal and external stakeholders to ensure that the 24 months time frame to amend the Act is adhered to. On the African agenda and solidarity with Palestine, Cuba, and others, the National Executive Committee noted, in addition to the work of the African Union on COVID-19 pandemic, the AU chairperson, Comrade Ramaphosa, is also steering the work on other key AU Agenda 2063 program, including infrastructure development, silencing the guns, African continental free trade, Africa Global Partnership, and reform and financing of the Union. As 2020 is dedicated to silencing the guns, work is in progress with Libya, Mozambique, and other countries. The AU chairperson, Comrade Ramaphosa, is also seized with the negotiation between Ethiopia and Egypt and Ethiopia regarding the African Renaissance Dam project. The National Executive Committee noted the liberation of the Palestine Solidarity Panel held on the 25th of June 2020 and added its voice to the global community who in the stronger terms condemned the plans by Israel to, on 1 July 2020, annex even more land on the Palestinian people as the most serious violation, horrible and violation of international rights. The National Executive Committee reiterated its stance that South Africa will continue to support a viable contiguous Palestinian state existing side by side with Israel within recognized borders of 1967, with East Jerusalem as its capital, in line with relevant United Nations and African Union resolutions. The National Executive Committee calls on all peace and freedom-loving South Africans, Africans and the entire world to continue to support the struggle of the Palestinians for self-determination and against oppression by Israel. The National Executive Committee reaffirmed the ANC solidarity with the struggling people of Western Sahara, as well as Cuba and Venezuela. The NEC congratulates the example of international solidarity which Cuba continues to set, and especially in the current global struggle against COVID-19 pandemic. We want to thank and take this opportunity to thank the Cuban doctors for their contribution to strengthening our health system, especially in rural areas, for the training of medical students and the broader role it plays in Africa to support and help develop health systems. The National Executive Committee supports the call by the Italian people for Cuba to be considered for the Nobel Peace Prize and reiterate its 54th National Conference resolution calling for the lifting of the U.S. embargo against Cuba. Lastly, on organizational matters, the National Executive Committee once more welcomed progress with finalizing discussion papers and midterm reviews for the National General Council, which was supposed to be held in August 2020. Given the current conditions, it will not be possible to hold the National General Council in 2020. It is therefore postponed until further notice. The ANC is postponed until next year. The ANC will continue with the midterm review, finalizing the discussion papers, and engaging with all its structures, society, the alliance, on the issues raised in these papers. Due to COVID conditions, provincial, regional, branch conferences of the leagues, it will be difficult this year to embark on such conferences. And these conferences are therefore postponed. And preparation must, however, continue to enable membership of all branches to be in a proper state. And for discussion documents of especially the Youth League and Women's League structures, as well as veterans, to continue taking place so that young people can discuss how they should go about building a vibrant African National Congress, Youth League, Progressive Youth Alliance, and South African Youth Council. The ANC welcomed progress with the implementation of the online membership system, which is live since the end of February 2020 and allows members to manage their own membership of the ANC. We furthermore welcome the report on the state of organizing, building, and campaigns, which shows that we can use and adapt to new technologies to communicate with our structures. In particular, the ANC, NEC appreciate the use of ANC Cloud to get word-by-word reports on our response as communities, society, and government to COVID-19 pandemic. Therefore, the National Executive Committee concluded its meeting by emphasizing the following key tasks for ANC branches as well as community structures. Community campaigns against pandemic must continue. Strong campaign against gender violence must continue. The struggle against and the campaign against racism must continue. Preparation for elections and strengthening of the local government sphere must continue. Strengthening branch work, contact with members, contact with communities, meetings of BECs, even if it's virtual, must continue. Continue with political work, political education sessions, visually, and encouraging members to register on the membership system and renew their membership, and rooting out corruption and building diligent and ethical leadership is our call. Fighting against factionalism, building maximum unity, building national solidarity, building national unity is our call. And ongoing international solidarity work must continue. This moment in the life of our nation demands that we act in accordance with the fundamental values of Ubuntu, emphasizing our common and interconnected human, that we act in solidarity with the hungry, the poor, the unemployed, the marginalized, the sick, the homeless, and that we act to ensure that South Africa truly belongs to all who live in it. Thank you very much. Long statement, but I think it was necessary because it was 2 long days of the National Executive Committee. Thank you.
No, thanks, SG.
About to sleep, some girl.
What we did was that when we issued the statement yesterday, we had indicated that because we were initially going to do a Zoom briefing, the Secretary General then requested that you could have this physical interaction with a few journalists. So most journalists have been plugged on the Zoom platform together with the Deputy Secretary General and the chairs of the subcommittees of ETC, Comrade Ino Godongwane, Comrade Lindiwe Zulu and Comrade Lindiwe Sisulu, to deal with social transformation issues. Comrade Amos from our media relations team is expected to have communicated such details to make sure that when questions are filed and those questions relate specifically to ETC or to peace and stability, because we also have got Comrade Tony Ngeni who's plugged in to deal with questions that have got to do with peace and stability. So I must apologize to those journalists and leaders who initially could only stream and were not on the briefing itself. So we have tried to make means and ways so that when questions are filed and those questions are specific to them, they would be able to respond on the Zoom platform. But also journalists, especially yourselves from mainstream broadcasters, you could still be able to pick up from the Zoom platform those questions and their related responses. I thought, Secretary General, I must just clarify this technicality and assure members of the media and those that we have invited from the leadership that there was a technical issue that we had since tried to deal with. We are trying very hard to deal with this new normal. In the past, our briefings would have been full, all journalists would have been here. But because of trying to comply with protocols, it's difficult. An organization like the ANC our size, we are doing everything we can to make sure that we accommodate all media houses in our briefings. I will now move to take questions, and that is, if these questions that relate to specific, whether it's ETC, peace and stability, social transformation, other organizational matters, the Deputy Secretary General, Comrade Tony, Comrade Ino Godongwane, Lindiwe Sisulu and Lindiwe Zulu have joined the briefing on Zoom. They should be able to respond as well. Comrades, the floor is now open. I'm sure that Comrade Amos, who is monitoring the questions that are coming through the Zoom platform, so that we could be able to also just help us there, Chris, just get Comrade Amos, because he needs to be here, so that when questions are coming in on the Zoom platform, we could be able to know how to direct them and ensure that they are responded to accordingly. We'll now open the floor for questions. We'll start with SBU, we'll come to ENCA, Samkelo, and then if there are questions on Zoom, We'll also just read those out, SG. Okay.
Thank you very much, Bule. Mr. Makashule, just as a first question, on the last comment you made that there is solidarity with the poor and the sick, and then by the same token, you announced that the NEC decided to reinstate the two leaders, and Limpopo were implicated in VBS because you're saying this has taken too long. Don't you think that you would have chosen this was the worst time for the NEC to take that decision, considering that these the arrests in relation to VBS happened just last week, but also number two, does it not undermine the very same integrity committee of the ANC? Because the issue of people being accused of crimes and not being charged had been dealt with in conferences, and I think the last resolution did say that anyone who's charged with a crime should step aside, regardless of whether they're in court or not. So can you just respond to that? And also, secondly, the issue of the municipalities. You say that you're concerned about the poor state of municipalities, in particular after the audit outcomes that were delivered by the Auditor General this afternoon. But then it goes back, some people might argue that it goes back to actually the ANC's manner of deployment. Not that anyone is saying anything is wrong with cadre deployment, but actually choosing the wrong people for those positions. Is the ANC taking any responsibility for that? Because I think that in response to COVID-19, it has shown that local governments got to be quite critical in that response. I've got other questions, but I don't want to hog the floor, so I think I will hand over to my colleagues. Oh, lastly, just before I hand over, the issue of, you say that state entities must avoid cutoffs, and also, I imagine you're referring to ESCOM in terms of electricity, and also evictions. So coming back to ESCOM, the Deputy President was in Parliament last week and saying that municipalities owe ESCOM 28 billion, and that the municipalities, by the time it goes back to Parliament, they would have repaid that money to ESCOM. So in saying that ESCOM must not cut off communities, how do you think ESCOM must be able to generate an income? But also, does that not contradict the very comments that were made by the Deputy President, where he said that the entities and municipalities that owe ESCOM must pay back the money that they owe? Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Samkela Masego from the SABC. Mine are speak in line with my colleagues Bungalo on the issue of the two Limpopo officials, Denim Caesar and Florence Radzelani. SG, there seems to be a bit of confusion here. You're saying these two leaders will be brought back immediately to office, but that would be preceded by consultations with affected parties linked to the VBS bank heist. Effectively, how does this consultation work? Are they still remaining in their suspension until this particular process of consultation is over, or do they immediately, as we speak now, walk into Francis Mhlala House and take out the deputy chairpersonship and treasurer position? And also, in the reinstatement of these particular leaders, your own integrity commission recommended that they remain suspended until this particular matter is criminally charged. Is this in accordance with the ANC ethos? And was there any DC or process followed by the African National Congress in the past 2 years that Florence Radzelani and Denim Caesar have been suspended? And have seemingly just tossed aside the Integrity Commission report and decided to bring them back? On the issue of the economy, and particularly around SAA, you speak that you support the restructuring of this particular airline. Have you had an engagement as the ANC, particularly after the radical socio-economic transformation resolutions that were taken at Nazareth, on who should be the private equity partners of this new airline, which will be majority owned by government? Do you want particular African people, Indian, colored? Can you have a classification of that particular area, particularly when you speak against the issue of white monopoly capital? And on the infrastructure projects, what are some of the energy projects that you will be embarking on? Are we looking at nuclear perhaps? Thank you.
Okay. So, just hold, Amos, are we seeing the questions that are coming on Zoom? Okay, we just need to also just pick up those questions that are coming on Zoom so that we can have everyone participating. Yes.
Thank you. It's Governor Whittles from ENCA. SG, on beginning with the issue of the Limpopo Treasurer and Deputy Chairperson that are suspended, will the consultations have any impact on the NEC's decision to reinstate them, or are they purely cosmetic and inconsequential? Secondly, you've said that the ANC wants to move the local government elections to be aligned to the national elections. That, of course, requires a national consensus in Parliament. When can we expect the ANC to be tabling a proposal in Parliament, and who will it be reaching out to achieve that consensus? And then you mentioned that the lockdown is easing, but the rate of infections of the coronavirus is increasing. And what is the ANC's position towards the easing of the lockdown? Do you believe that it's a good idea to continue with the easing while the rate of infections have increased? In the Eastern Cape, the Premier has asked for intervention from the President, and we see reports of hospitals now filling up and sending some patients home because of the lack of beds. Did you discuss this in the NEC and the Eastern Cape's Mayday call? And finally, SG, did the NEC discuss at all the comments of the Chief Justice surrounding the state of Israel? I've seen a confirmation of your solidarity with the people of Palestine. What was your opinion of the Chief Justice weighing in on that? Thanks.
Smuda? Uwe. Leo, can we just try and reveregele na kompapa? It doesn't need to be rehearsed, just quickly. So what's happening is that they go into Zoom. So they take questions. So let's say if there's a specific question for ETC, so we ask a question that is specific to ETC. They are now watching it. We're streaming it on Zoom as well. Then they can answer on the Zoom platform. Yeah.
Yes, who is the political editor for Newsroom?
Oh, Sfiso. Hey. Sorry, man, Sfiso.
All right. I have three.
I'm a sanitizer, man. Kwenziwa nje into eziningi. Hey.
Okay. 3 questions, SG. In 1998, the Republic of Zimbabwe applied for funding from the IMF and the World Bank. The IMF turned them down because they took a stance against their land redistribution policy. Can you take us into your confidence this afternoon? Sources inside the ANC have revealed to us that it was Mr. Tito Mboweni who called for the borrowing of the funds, 500 billion from the World Bank and the IMF. And you, Mr. Makashule, took a stand against that. You argued that the ANC or the Republic of South Africa should rather borrow money from the East and not the West, because these were people who were our colonizers. However, having borrowed that money, on the amendment of Section 25 of the Constitution, what are some of the conditions that the World Bank and the IMF gave you? Can you take South Africa into your confidence and tell us this afternoon if the ANC will still be able to expropriate land without compensation, even after borrowing money from the IMF and the World Bank? My second question, SG, concerns the Free State. We understand with a confirmation this morning from the Hawks that the Premier of the Free State is being investigated. She's been investigated for channeling funds from the office of the Premier, your previous office, into the ANC in the Free State. I want to know if you know about that and if you can make a comment thereof. My third question is a simple one. In the past, the DSG, Ms. Jessie Duarte, made a statement in support and in defense of Executive Chair of Independent statements to his support and the support of his companies when there was an attempt or an application for liquidation. A few days ago, there were attempts on Dr. Iqbal's service type. I would like you to make a comment there. Thank you very much.
Okay, we have got another. How many questions do we have coming from Zoom? Okay, do you want to just read them out for us? You can use the mic then.
Okay. The first question is from Alex Winning of Reuters, and it goes, does the ANC support delaying the 2021 local government elections because of COVID-19? Question 2, has the ANC-NEC directed its deployees in government to provide government funding for the restructuring of SAA as outlined in the Business Rescue Plan? Number 3, what size of basic income grant does ANC want government to introduce and from when? Those are the 3 questions from Alex Winning of Reuters.
So these are mostly, they sound more like they've got to do with the economic transformation, so the social transformation. Comrade Enoch and Comrade Lindy are still plugged in, so they should be able to respond to that. You said we might not be able to hear them. So if we plug them here, will we be able to hear? Yes. Okay, that's fine. So they can answer from here. Just get us the router quickly, and when they answer from here. We can start with you, SG, to deal with the other questions, while we are trying to connect and make sure that they can, the other, so all the other NECs, the DSG, Comrade Tony, Comrade Enoch, Comrade Lindiwe Zulu and Lindiwe Sisulu are plugged in. So they will also be responding. We'll make sure that we can plug them here, so you will be able to hear when they answer. Okay.
Well, thank you very much. I'm sure you are aware that, let me start with the last question. I'm sure social transformation and economic transformation will respond to it. But on the basic income grant, I think we have said there is a paper which is out there, which is going to allow our structures and society as a whole to make inputs in terms of how they think and what they think and how they feel in terms of implementing basic income grant, which has been a debate for many years by the ANC and its alliance partners. And I'm sure we are arguing that it is time to implement it. And that's why maybe the concept of 350 rand, but more details will be given, but we are calling for the public to make inputs. Number 2, do we support delayed elections? I think what we are just saying, in terms of the Constitution, local government elections are supposed to take place. If the COVID conditions continue, will be directed by the IEC, will be directed by the courts as to whether it's possible to postpone because of conditions of COVID. If conditions are not okay for us to continue with elections, we have no choice but to ensure that we have elections of local government in 2021. But indeed, we are calling for synchronized elections, one single elections by all spheres, and we are saying obviously it will need the amendment to the Constitution, and if we have to amend the Constitution, we will engage other parties. EFF has also made a point about one single elections. So there are many other parties also are in Parliament. We'll engage with them, and if we agree, obviously, we shall have to amend the Constitution. And as South Africans, I'm sure it might be better to have one single elections because we can actually deal with many other issues, including party funding. On the allegations and of Free State, it's unfortunate all the time we want to respond to allegations. I know that I can't talk on their behalf. I don't think you just can do such things, but allegations are not facts. So let's not always tarnish the image of people by allegations. and allegations have made people to sometimes be dealt and all that. I think the ANC must never move away from the universal principle of innocence until proven otherwise. Because members of the ANC must enjoy what the Constitution of South Africa says. And that Constitution of South Africa says you are innocent until proven otherwise. And it's a universal principle. And that's why we argue that you can't forever suspend people. And we have actually discussed the report of the Integrity Commission. The Integrity Commission clearly understood that it does not have original power. It is actually engaging with the national executive. They said this is our decision, but the National Executive Committee has a right to decide. And that's what the National Executive Committee said. These comrades have not been charged by anybody. These comrades, in terms of the allegations, they were mentioned in several reports. Like many comrades were mentioned in reports, you can't charge people because of allegations. And therefore, that's why we said after almost 2 years, these comrades must come back. But we are sensitive to the fact that during this BBS issue, a lot of people died. Some people died. And we are actually calling upon the law enforcement agencies to swiftly act against the perpetrators who might have participated in killing some of the people who stay around that area. And that's why we are saying we are actually reinstating the two comrades. And as I've said, that's how we work. We have actually engaged and we have informed the province before we could go out to the public to say we are going to ensure that Comrade Denny and Florence assumes their responsibilities. But as we are saying in our statement, we are going to engage our structures. We are going to engage society. We are going to ensure that we explain the rationale behind the decision which the National Executive Committee has taken. And this decision, I read in the papers, the President said this, the NEC said, this decision is the decision of the National Executive Committee as a collective. And the National Executive Committee is the highest decision-making body in between the National Conference. So it's National Conference, National Executive. And that's why we are actually ensuring, comrades, that we are saying to our structures, they can't jump the gun. The highest decision-making body has taken a decision, and we'll go down, before we implement, we'll go down and engage our structures for them to understand why we have actually arrived at this decision. It is no disrespect to whoever out there. It is how we deal with the issues of justice. And I think it's the right thing to do. In terms of the IMF, look, in the ANC, there is no Ismakashule's view, there is no Tito Mbeweni's view. Our views are subjected to the National Executive Committee, and the views of the collective becomes the resolutions and decisions of the structure. In this case, the National Executive Committee, as well as the Alliance partners, COSATU and SACP, we have taken a very clear resolution that traditionally IMF and World Bank, they have a particular history. And we have said we are part of BRICS, so we must approach our new development bank. We are part of AU, that is African Development Bank. We must approach the African Development Bank. But whenever you need money, if World Bank conditions and interests are fine, and IMF conditions are fine, for as long as our national sovereignty and independence are not compromised, we look at the benefits which will actually benefit South Africa. Whether it's even also a new development bank, whether it's African Development Bank, if conditions are are conditions which are not acceptable to the South African government. We have said we must make sure that we don't compromise our sovereignty, our independence. But we are an African country, and Africa is very, very important. And we are part of these institutions, we participate in them, and therefore we mustn't be afraid to even change those institutions ourselves as the African National Congress. As we have changed a lot of things in the world and persuaded people to see things differently. But the bottom line is very clear. We should look at those conditions, and if those conditions are not favorable to South Africa, we have confidence in our deployees, because in charge and in government is the ANC government. On the issue of the Chief Justice, we have actually noted that in terms of the Constitution of South Africa is a secular country. In a secular country, we recognize all these religions. And we are actually just saying, we have the executive, we have the judiciary, and we have the parliament, the legislature. And we have said the president and the speaker of parliament will need to engage with the Chief Justice around these issues. Our stance is very clear. We respect the people of Palestine, self-determination, and we are continuing to say to Israel, they cannot continue, because there is also a United Nations resolutions which support the position we are actually stating in our statement. In terms of the state entities and the cut-offs, we are just saying, and I think it's a position we have adopted. We are against retrenchments. And we are actually saying minimum retrenchments, direction of those who might actually be affected to do something else, to be retrained, to be reskilled, and we don't want people to have to lose jobs. That is our bottom line, and I think we are encouraging all our state entities, we are encouraging, including the public sector, we are encouraging SABC. Imagine SABC retrenching 600 people during this COVID. What is going to happen to the lives of those people? What's going to happen to their houses? What's going to happen to their cars? What's going to happen to their children? These are people who are breadwinners. You might be journalists, but you are a part of society. And that's the position we are actually pushing. And we are saying, let's be sensitive. And we are saying also to ESCOM, a lot of municipalities, indeed, some of the municipalities have no tax base, they are not viable, we are dealing with this matter. Some of the municipalities were able to collect revenue. Citizens are not paying today because of Corona. Businesses, SARS also cannot actually collect what it was actually collecting in the past. And therefore, we are faced with situations and conditions which are serious. And therefore, you can't, because people are not, and municipalities are no more paying ESCOM what they used to pay them, you then say ESCOM must cut. And that's why we see protests all over, because there are these cuts. And we are actually saying to ESCOM, we are saying to SABC management, please be sensitive to the needs of our people, especially the poor. And the ANC has a pro and bias to the working class. The ANC can't close its eyes when the working class and when the poor are going through these difficulties. And when the black in general, the blacks in general are actually suffering under this, the middle class. People's houses are being repossessed, they don't know what to do because of COVID and the COVID conditions, and the economy is highly affected. So I've dealt with the allegations, and I've said allegations are allegations. And well, the reinstatement of Delhi, it's a decision of the National Executive Committee. It's not a decision of Ismail Mashule, it's not a decision of President Ramaphosa. It's a decision of the National Executive Committee in its entirety. And therefore, rely on us, because we are not depending on hearsay. We are not depending on allegation. We are not depending on the sources inside NEC members saying 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Here I am today giving you facts about the resolutions of the African National Congress. Whether the lockdown will continue working, if we ease, we have said will depend on science, will depend on government to guide us, because government is working with scientists around this issue of COVID-19. Our position is always nuclear. Of course, nuclear is part of our position in terms of mixed energy. And I think our position is very, very clear. Private equity in terms of SAA, we are saying 100%, 50 majority shareholding government. We are equally calling for our own financial institutions, PFIs, to participate if possible. Wherever they see an opportunity, if it makes business sense, we are saying to the private sector, we can't choose for government as the ANC. There is government, there are ministers, those are our employees, we have confidence in them. Whoever they see as the right partner, that partner will come in for as long as government and for as long as these entities will also have an understanding of playing a developmental role, because it is very important when these institutions were established, there was this part of a developmental role, either ESCOM or SAA, because we still want to fly the South African flag. I think those were the questions and the issues of municipalities. I wish, fortunately, most of us are not councillors. What councillors are going through is something else, because if you can't collect, if you have no tax base, what do you do? So, and that's why we are saying we must support our councillors. We must deal with corruption wherever it is. And we appreciate the fact that government is going to allocate 20 billion to our municipalities. You must also remember, ESCOM also does owe municipalities. You must also remember, if you don't owe ESCOM, ESCOM adds penalties. If you don't pay a jump amount, those penalties are serious and more than what you are actually supposed to pay. The interest of ESCOM, and the discussion is continuing. And I think we'll engage ESCOM, and ESCOM will actually deal with some of the challenges. And government has been giving all the state entities, own enterprises money. You call them bailouts. The government has been doing so. And we are saying to government, and therefore, these entities must also understand the challenges which society is facing. I think I've responded to almost all the questions. Thank you. The last question, I think, yes, we are aware of what you call attack on the life of Mr. Iqbal, and we are saying, like any South Africans, this is uncalled for, and the law enforcement agencies must investigate, and the perpetrators must actually be brought to book. And we are actually saying to all South Africans, this is the time to unite. This is the time to build a better South Africa for all.
Okay, no, thanks, SG. We will now take, there was Comrade Lindy where Zulu wanted to answer. All chairs of subcommittees have joined. So I'm going to allow them to answer using the Zoom platform. Sis Lindy?
Yeah, thank you very much, Comrade Bule. I wanted to quickly respond to the issue of the basic income. And also, I need to connect to the United Nations. So I will, there are other questions that journalists can connect to myself after this meeting in relation to issues related particularly to government.
Use your platform.
With regard to the basic income grant, I will take everyone back to the fact that as way back as the year 2000, there was a trade that presented a report at the time in terms of looking at the social grants in general. And I can say that South Africa has got one of the best social protection systems that we have. and that they are seen in the form of the implementation of all other social grants, including child grant, elderly, and so forth. But when it comes to this one of basic income grant, the discussion did not conclude from a point of view how must it be implemented, when must it be implemented. And my Department of Social Development started the conversation already around November last year about looking at this basic income grant. But now when COVID happened and the need for us to extend in as far as the support that we are giving to our communities, especially the poor, and when President Cyril Ramaphosa also announced that grant of 350, which falls under SRD, we then thought it's best for us to actually pull that report back into discussion, because
Is this helping journalists?
That will help us to take us into the future. That we discuss, as the SG has correctly said. The SG says, and then the decision of the NEC was to take this discussion to the social transformation subcommittee, take it back to the alliance partners, who, by the way, alliance partners were part and parcel of the Taylor report and agreed on the Taylor report. So all we need to do now is to go back into this discussion that we need to take in as far as basic income grant is concerned, the fiscal costs about that, the impact thereof. But when all is said and done, when we need to look at it,
It's not up, it's her.
we must look at
Using the
our
phone.
from a financial so that they can be able to, especially the ones that are lost, the ones who are elderly grants, or the ones who are in the children's grant, the ones that are in between are the ones that we have to rescue. So we will have a conversation at STC, and I think people can follow up on the discussion.
They can hear, you can pick up.
Decision has been taken by the NEC that let's look into this and see to the implementation. Thank you, Comrade Pule.
No. Thank you very much, Comrade Lindy. There was just a problem of audio, but it looks like our television colleagues here have been able to pick up the audio. Can we get more answers? We've got Comrade Enoch, and we've got Comrade Lindy Sisulu, who are plugged in. Comrade Enoch, on issues around economic transformation.
And thank you. A number of have been touched by the SG. A quick one on the SAA. The question, there are two questions there. The first one is one that looks at the color of the investor. I don't think the NEC has gone to that detail of saying this is the color of the investor with the strategic partners we want to do. We want people who are going to bring equity partnership in SAA. That's the first point. The second point, have we directed the government to pay? We've never directed the government to spend money which may not be available. And the ANC set up the parameters, and then government work up accordingly. Insofar as the infrastructure is concerned, I can see the journalist is concerned in trying to centralize and such nuclear, perhaps. I think when we're not centralizing, we're trying to be rational here. Among other things is that on Tuesday, the 23rd, the government president had a symposium. Among other things there were a number of projects that were revealed. Some of them, about 51 of them, which are ready, and there's a commitment of funding of about 60 billion rand. The ANC welcomes that and want to encourage that process. And insofar as energy is concerned, there's an integrated resource plan, which covers different sources of energy and technologies. We're not prescribed in the government which one will meet the requirements. Is going to depend on the needs for security of supply, and government then will choose the technology to meet that requirement. I think the SG has answered the IMF issue, which is basically the condition the ANC has put for since 1992 is that our sovereign space must not be compromised. And therefore, the notion of whether we're going to continue with the amendment of compensation of without compensation is not dependent on the discussions of that law. Thank you, Chair.
Comrade Lindy Sisulu.
Any specific questions relating to that I would have wanted to respond to, but I do want to just add a matter that was very relevant in the discussions that we might want to put across to our people, and that is the matter of gender-based violence. We have assessed this phenomenon and we've come to the decision that it is now femicide. The rate at which it is happening in our country is nothing but that. And we have made a number of recommendations which have been accepted by the NEC, and that is that the ANC must lead the civil society in this, and we would like to see men at the forefront of this, the men in the NEC. So I'm certain that when the SG gets off the stage, he will have a placard that says, leave our women alone, or something. Because the very essence of the ANC, which is freedom and certain values, involves basically the freedom of the most vulnerable. And the most vulnerable in our society right now are women, butchered on a regular basis, made worse by the conditions under which we live. And therefore, we have decided to put this as a priority issue on the agenda for all men to make sure that they can come together and stop this crime. This is an evil crime that will not be tolerated. And it manifests itself mostly around places where it is very difficult for the police to reach because it is in a domestic environment or in an environment of some kind of companionship. Therefore, we want to make sure that all of society is mobilized to be sensitive to this and protect our women. We want to make sure that the police act urgently on these matters. We want to make sure that the police have an environment in the police stations where women feel comfortable to respond or go and lay a charge instead of feeling like they are being accused of having brought this onto themselves. We are wanting to get onto a point where women themselves are mobilized to understand that they have rights and they should defend those rights. Basically, that is what we were talking about, and wanting to launch a campaign to make sure that everybody is on board. Government is on board already. We have the minister in the presidency leading a number of other departments such as police, correctional services, and other areas to ensure that we are able to put together a project that will assist women, especially young women, which is what we experienced here in the Western Cape when the young student from UCT died. All the women in Cape Town marched onto Parliament and said, you're not protecting us. And we made certain promises to them, and we must make sure that we live up to those promises across the country, that there should not be a single woman more dying while we lead the country. Thank you, Chairperson.
No, thanks, Sis Lindy. DSG.
Good afternoon, everyone. I thought I would just amplify a little bit of some of the discussion that was top of mind at the NEC was the saving of lives during this period of COVID. And one of the things we went into quite a bit of detail on is what we need to do now that we are experiencing an upward curve and a number of infections a day that's quite alarming, and what we need to do. One of the things we discussed was we do need to get into the space of making sure that the defense against this virus comes from the people themselves, with our help, of course, and with the support of the government, whom we thought had done very, very well. And we believe that that needs to be acknowledged, that our government has done a very good job. And their primary objective was to save lives in everything that they have put forward thus far. And we were happy with what they have done. But for the ANC itself, we will continue to use all social media platforms to beam messages on people washing their hands, keeping a social distance, and also making sure that they wear a mask all the time, whether indoors or outdoors. If there are more than one person in a room, a mask is essential. We hope that there's a very clear understanding amongst us that our people do live in very, very difficult conditions. And very often, if you're living in a single room, to have social distance is virtually impossible. But we need to try. We need to do our best to try to save as many lives as we possibly can. In addition to that, we have discussed how we will continue to engage with our structures. We've used various platforms. We've had meetings with branches, with regions, with provinces on various social media platforms. Sorry, bad connection. They appear to be working quite well. We are communicating as much as we can't travel much. We are communicating, and we have been able to assess whether our branches are growing, and they are. We're now on 1.6 million members of the ANC. And the ANC is not only about membership, but the quality of that membership. So our political education school has run a number of political education lectures, and we will continue to build the organization to be effective and to be amongst the people. Thank you very much, Comrade Pule.
Okay.
Is it there?
This one must be muted.
Is Comrade Tony in the briefing to deal with issues of peace and stability? Otherwise, we'll have to take the next round of questions. Okay, this is effectively the last round. So, Amos, we don't have other questions coming on the platforms. We don't have journalists have not raised their hands. Okay. Yes.
Thank you. Robin again from ENCA. Did I hear the DSG correctly? They're saying that the ANC now has 1.6 million members.
DSG, this is the question for the DSG.
On our membership system at the moment, we have 1.6 million members. Pule, Comrade Pule, I don't know if you heard me. Okay, on our membership system at the moment, right now, we have 1.6 million members.
That it doesn't seem to form part of best practice in combating the coronavirus globally. Then on the issue of the Botswana government, there was a report this week which said that the State Security Minister Yanda Dlodlo was en route to Botswana to meet with the Botswana president over the issue of Ms. Bridget Motsepe Radebe and the charges that she faces. And then there's a further report which says, coming from Botswana, that the BDP has met with the ANC to discuss this matter. Is there any truth to either of those two reports? What's your view on this matter?
Okay. Tobacco, Botswana, meeting.
Again, it's Spungala from Newsroom Africa. No, but I must say that your response to the two leaders that are implicated in VBS, it kind of reinforces the impression that the ANC is not serious about fighting corruption. And I'll tell you why. There have been, for instance, at a local government level, there have been countless reports of accusations against councillors, particularly ANC councillors, in terms of the social response in parcels and in how they've been embezzled by councillors. And I'm sure as the SGU received some reports, because it's been ANC regions that have been getting involved in resolving some of those issues. But nowhere, we've not seen anywhere where the ANC has actually spoken of any investigation or any action against any particular councillor. If there is, perhaps you can help me, you can assist me in that regard. Can you respond to that? There's also in front of the State Capture Commission, the former chairperson of PRASA, Only, told the commission that he had met with the ANC top six, that is the top six as led by former President Jacob Zuma, and had told them about corruption at PRASA, and that top six did nothing. I know SG, you might be tempted to say you were not part of it, but I know that the DSG was part of it. I would like a response to that formally. Thank you.
Truly sorry, there's an urgent matter which was obvious and we have.
You don't want us to just allow Sfiso so that he doesn't feel that we are neglecting him. Comrade Sfiso, it's now your chance.
Very kind of you.
Yes.
One question, SG. I would like to get the ANC's official position on the arms deal case. Former President Jacob Zuma appeared at the Pietermaritzburg High Court last week. Previously, the ANC had advised that individuals who go to court or outside of court in support of the former president do that at their own discretion and they can, however, not to wear the ANC medallion. I want to understand if that is still the position. What does the ANC say thereof? I did not hear the report. Was it discussed in the NEC? Was there a highlight on the arms deal case? It is discussed, it is considered that many ANC leaders, former leaders, might be implicated in this arms deal case. What is the ANC's position there?
Okay.
Which many leaders and former leaders.
Gavin?
It's the issues of the salaries. You've seen the letter that was sent out saying that there will be delay in paying salaries. But what is the problem with the ANC's finances that doesn't allow it to pay the salaries?
Okay, that's fine. The SG will deal with all the other questions. We've already issued a statement so that you don't say, because if you say we've seen, you want us to justify a leaked letter. So what we have done as the ANC and in our name, we have issued a statement yesterday conveying what we have already communicated to employees. Employees have been advised on when they are going to be receiving their salaries. So that is really an internal matter between the African National Congress and those that are in its employ. The same way that it will apply if it was ENCA. SG? Or let me first check, SG, if all the other comrades on the platform don't want to enter. Comrade Enoch, DSG, Sislindi, Z, Lindy, Sisulu. Comrade Tony, if you are there. Are there any specific questions that have been asked which maybe comrades might want to respond to?
Comrade Pule, if I may, before my light strip again, just take the question of the 15 community councillors who have been accused. 15 community councillors who have been accused of having actually taken food parcels for themselves. Of all the 15 community councillors, 14 of them indeed are from the ANC. All of those have been criminally charged, and many of them still have to appear in court. They've had first appearances, and they will appear in courts of law. We've chosen to deal with it like that. Most of them, in fact, all of them are no longer councillors. One of them was falsely accused because there was a conflict between herself and another person, and that matter was then not criminally charged. So, in fact, I don't think it's quite correct to say out of the 4,000 odd councillors that are ANC councillors that we've done nothing to deal with the situation of, in particular, the food parcels we have. We've worked with Salga to assist us where we might have missed 1 or 2 complaints, and Salga has been helpful in providing information to us as well, as and when they're getting. On the issue of the statement made by Popo Molefe yesterday, and yes, he did meet with the officials of the ANC when President Jacob Zuma was president of the ANC. He did inform us of his allegations that he was making against the then CEO, and in addition to that, some of the staff members at the SOE. One of the things that became quite clear was that the power to take action in terms of the King report, as well as in terms of the Criminal Procedures Act, as well as in terms of the Companies Act, was solely in his hands and in the hands of him, and at times in consultation or after consultation with the minister who was the shareholder. At the time when he came to us, much of what he said was based on what he had heard from someone else. I don't think that it's any different yesterday, but the ANC certainly will respond. Our lawyers are looking at the matter as we speak to investigate and interrogate how best we can deal with it at the Zondo Commission, and that's where we will fully answer. There's nothing to hide. We were approached, and obviously when we are approached, we have to take cognizance of it, but the people responsible is him and as the board, and at the time they had the power to act really. On the other matter that he raised about money and so on, many of you will remember this is an old story. It keeps surfacing, and in the time when Zweli Mkhize was the TG of the ANC, he answered this question over and over again. And it's surfacing again one more time. And of course, we will answer it again in the same way that we did before. And maybe if you look back on your own research, you'll find those answers. But to put it very clinically, everything that is raised about the ANC in the Zondo Commission, we will answer for in the Zondo Commission. SG, thank you very much.
No, thank you very much, DSG. I'm sure it helps journalists who have been really raising this question. The ANC has never been scared to answer any question that comes across. The other comrade Enoch, comrade Lindy Zulu, Lindy Sisulu, comrade Tony, if there are any specific questions that you might want to answer before the SG makes takes the final bite on the matter. Well, it looks like we'll have to invite the SG. This will be the last session, SG, and then afterwards we close the briefing. Thanks.
Now, I'm sure DSG has covered the question on PRASA. I was going to respond to it. even if I was not part of the top 6, because the ANC is a continuous organization. I can't say what the leadership did. I was not part of it. I'm responsible for the ANC. And whatever decisions taken by the ANC leadership at any given stage is the decision of the ANC. So I was going to, not to say, no, I was not part of that top 6. I was going to respond the way DSG has responded, because I know that we are informed, well informed about what Comrade Popo Molefe said. And that's why we say stories, allegations don't constitute a crime. And that's where we need to be very careful as the media, because we also trembling on the rights of others. People have rights in terms of the Constitution, and the law enforcement are there. And at times when people are supposed to report things to the law enforcement and open charges, people come to the ANC and say, this is what is happening. When, if there is crime, report crime. I think the ANC has consistently said that. The last question, I think DSG has responded on the councillors, and that was going to be my response. So we can provide you with more details of what actions has been taken and all that, so that you know that the ANC has always been transparent. We are more transparent than any other political party in South Africa. We fought for the changes of the laws ourselves because we are in the majority. Any law which passes in Parliament needs our support, and we are initiators of such laws. The arms deal case, President Zuma, and I know people sometimes become very sensitive when you say President Zuma, President Mbeki, President Mandela, President Tambo. That's the lexicon, the vocabulary of the ANC. In the ANC, we have never referred them as former presidents, but we know the current president is Comrade Cyril. And long ago, we have given the members of the ANC permission, if they want to go to the case to support Jacob Zuma, they have a right. It's their own choice, and as members of the ANC, we can't prevent any member from going to the case. If it was not because of COVID, I was going to go to the case, because the ANC has taken a position. And during difficult times, you support one of your own. Don't run away, because we believe that the person is innocent until proven otherwise. So the regalia is, we have long resolved this matter. I think we are repeating it several times. They have the right to wear whatever they want to wear as members of the ANC. Yeah. Salaries, I think TG is dealing with that matter, and it's better to leave it to the Treasurer General, because the Treasurer General handles the finances of the ANC. But you can see it's difficult times throughout with all companies and all that. And on Botswana, I think you can speak directly to Comrade Ayanda Dlodlo. We're not aware of any development around that. So Comrade Ayanda is available to respond to your questions. And at the right time, we have not yet met with BDP. Those are our friends and a party we always engage on. At any given stage, I know the Secretary General of the governing party in Botswana has tried to get hold of me yesterday. I will be phoning him back. And Botswana is Botswana. In South Africa, in terms of tobacco, the case is still in court. So there has been an outcome around tobacco, and there is another case which is still in court. So let's wait for that process. But our decisions of the National Command, time to time, they will advise us, be it alcohol, be it tobacco products. I'm sure they will guide us at all times. So thank you very much. I think we have briefed South Africans about the decisions of the African National Congress. We are a humble leadership. We still associate ourselves as a liberation movement. We are pro-poor. We are biased to the working class and will forever retain that character of the liberation movement. We will never abandon our people. We are a government which recognizes non-racialism. We believe human beings are human beings, but we believe that for us to have economic transformation, blacks in general must be empowered. We must be biased to blacks and the Africans in particular. That's what our strategy and tactics say. Thank you very much, Pule and our media.
No, thank you very much, SG. There was a special request from CCTV. TV. It has got to do with the commemoration of the Communist Party of China. Yes, so you could
CGTF.
CGT. CCTV. Yeah, CCTV. So they wanted you to just quickly take a bite on a tribute to the Communist Party of China.
We do one-on-one.
Yeah, but we can do it while he's here. I get a one-on-one only means that. Two questions of five. Yes. Okay.
So we must congratulate the South African Communist Party and the Communists of Party in celebrating their anniversaries.
Oh, that's fine. Yeah, you can just come and then talk to the SG. So you can put a chair and then see. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, comrades, it's fine. You can.
CCTV,